Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. It's Jeremy from Hat Media in the August webinar. If I am a bit loud, please feel free to turn me down, so to speak. Today, what we're going to be doing is having a look at landing page conversion rates and some things you can do to improve them. Just to be sort of more clear, what we're not looking at in great detail, although of course we refer to it, is the process of optimizing, of CRO, if you like, of optimizing conversion rates. We're not talking about process, and nor in huge amount of detail, although there is a little bit about it, are we talking about testing. Now, what's interesting about conversion rates and the whole area of sort of user conversion, user experience, is that there are many opinions, and there's also a fair amount of science behind the whole thing as well. And again, it can get quite complicated because you're looking at things like user behavior, psychology, and all that sort of thing. Personally, I find that absolutely fascinating. And in fact, I would go as far to say that I find the whole subject of conversion and usability and user experience and user journeys probably one of the most fascinating parts, or one of the most fascinating areas of digital marketing. I even learned a lot when I was sort of preparing and researching for this little webinar. So for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to look at some of the key aspects and have a little bit of consideration about these. And as I say, I hope you find it useful. And by all means, ask a chat question, or indeed after the webinar, by all means, direct message me. I've got some contact details in. Because I really do find it a fascinating area, and hopefully you'll see some things which will make you revisit your own web pages and look at them with a positively critical attitude, I should say. And the way I've structured this webinar is to show you, is really by example. I've taken some examples from across the web, including some of the sites, some of the UX sites out there, and sort of found some examples to share with you of good practice, of best practice. And also there's some nice ideas that may make you think as well. So without further ado, and we could move to the first slide if I can. Sometimes there's a bit of a delay here, which there is right now, of course. Murphy's Law. Here we go. Okay, so the first key thing, and I'm going to just skip over this one really quite fast, because the most important thing to get right on your web pages, on your key landing pages, are your calls to action, your CTAs, as it were. And we're going to have a look at how some of the things that you can do to improve them. Now, what's not good is just having something deep in a menu, or even along the top of the menu bar, just sort of with a contact us or something like that, or even a left-hand menu, just saying contact us in tiny little font. This really isn't doing yourself any favors. And what we need is something to entice or encourage people to interact with us. And of course, this isn't just about your home page, this is about your landing pages as well. So if you're in the business of retail or say charity, clearly you want people to do things. In fact, no matter what business you're in or what organization you work for, when you get people to your web pages, you want them to do things. Now, that is the call to action. That, if you like, is the definition of the call to action. And here you can see that on this particular example I've got here, you've got the logo, which, while important, is not anywhere near as important as the CTA button. And so you want to use size. You want to make the button big enough to be seen, and I wouldn't say in your face, but it has to be noticeable. And that should take the site visitor or the site user to click on that button. So we've got here, request a free, in capital letters, quote today. But this is really an example of size being used. So it's a big chunky button. It's not just like a little tiny contact us. Now also use position. And in this example, we've got what I would say a little bit of an overlay going on. So even though the content is there, again, we're using the free word slightly more modestly. But again, you can see we've used position. It's sitting over at the top. And obviously that's not static, that's going to be moving around. So use position to get people to complete your calls to action as well. Here we're using color. Now, in the workshops I do internationally, I often talk about which are the best colors to use. And generally speaking, you need to have a color that, in this case, contrasts with the colors behind it, or at least get someone's attention. I'm not wild about the use of the wording on this one, learn more, but this really is an example of color being used well. A fairly bright but not garish yellow sitting behind the blackish or the black text. So that's again using color. So we talk use size and use color. Third one here, we've got really a little bit more than just a CTA. We've got a little bit of information. So we're saying 30-day, big button, again, big button. It's for Basecamp, the collaborative tool, which I can highly recommend as one of 2 or 3 really good collaborative tools out there. Another one we use is called Teamwork. So we used Basecamp for a number of years. If you haven't had a look at it, definitely check it out. But here their call to action, see plans and pricing, which is good. 30-day free trial, sign up in 60 seconds. And you really can sign up in 60 seconds on this. They are not lying. So here it's using the CTA button not only to get someone to click on it, in other words, complete the call to action, but with a little bit of information that may make the decision slightly easier. A bit more of an extension on the use of the free word. So it's 30 days free and sign up in 60 seconds. Okay, so moving on. Alternate actions. We've got often software companies do this, and it's a good thing to do if you have a software company, or if you've got 2 things you want people to do, because maybe they're not quite ready to commit to the sign up now. If you like, they don't want to spend money, they don't even want to sign up for the free offer. So, but we put in a separate thing they can do, which is a take the tour. And of course, this is a secondary action, which of course ultimately leads back to the sign up now anyway. So at the end of the take the tour, it'll be a video or some slides or something like that. It would take a person back. But again, you notice in all of these cases, these buttons are clear, they're large, they're using colors that, if you like, are significantly different from the background color. And also the use of the wording is quite direct. You're not saying please or anything like that. You're just telling people sign up. And this is what I would like you to do, is go back onto your landing pages, and I would like you to look at your calls to action. Do they fulfill these criteria? And could they be made better? So starting with your home page, look at your other landing pages and say, what do we want people to do? Are we making it really clear what we want people to do? Do we have buttons that are there above the fold and sometimes below the fold as well? Because if you have a long piece of content, particularly in a retail scenario, you want a button, but in both places you want a button at the top for people who just want to buy the product quickly, and you want to have a button at the end, which is, I guess, more traditional place to put it, but not necessarily the best place. So have a look at your own button. So that's the first sort of learning from this, the first one. Now also bear in mind, have a look at your site with mobile. So actually either use one of the applications online where you can do this. You can literally look at it as if you were looking at it with a tablet or a smartphone, or actually get one out and look at it. The problem with smartphones and tablets is there are so many of them out there that you probably want to look at your page under multiple conditions. So this is, and when you design your calls to action, bear in mind that we're looking at now in Western Europe around about 50% of people or 50% of the traffic or more that you're getting is going to be from mobile devices. So that means that as well as designing your CTAs for standard desktops and laptops, of course, we have to also look to see what they look like. Now, Vine is essentially built for mobile devices. Hence, you've got the option here, get it for iOS, get it for Android, get it for Windows. And this is obviously clearly, even if you look at it via a desktop or a laptop, is clearly designed for people who have mobile devices or smartphones or whatever. But make sure you do the same thing. So as well as, other thing I'd like you to do, as well as looking at your CTAs with regards to with the traditional, like the laptops and workstations, actually look at it with the mobiles as well. And again, they should be clear and so on. Now, that's tip one, CTAs. Okay, so a lot of focus there on CTAs. Tip two, or strategy, use effective headlines. And I actually just dropped this slide in around about 5 minutes ago because I was running through the slides. I was having a look around and I thought, hang on a minute. I was looking at some of the sources I use. There's a wonderful quote here and I'll read it out for you. I know you're not meant to read slides out, but hey, on average, 5 times as many people read the headline as read the body copy. When you've written your headline, you've spent 80 cents out of your dollar. What David Ogilvy's saying there is have a strong headline. Sometimes people only want the headline. And this is whether you're writing a blog post, whether you're writing an ebook, whether you are trying to sell a service, often sell a product. Obviously, you're limited when you've got product names and so on and so forth. But it's really when you want people to engage or convert on your landing pages. Use that headline to grab their attention. And I've got a few examples here, which is fairly ironic in a sense, which is 5 easy tricks to help you write catchy headlines. I felt that some of these tricks, and I'm sure by now you're thinking, well, what are these tricks? Some of these tricks were a little bit simplistic. I think there's a lot more to writing headlines than just applying a sort of formula. And I think you need to think really carefully. What are those 5 tips, by the way? You're probably wondering. Use numbers, something we see used a lot now when you get ebooks you're being told about ebooks X number of ways. These tips, I should add, are more geared towards blog posts, ebooks, and that sort of content, rather than say e-com type shop landing pages. Now that was one of the interesting points that came out of some of my research, which is, of course, when you're talking about user conversion, one size never fits all. You really have to consider the marketplace that you're in, what you want your users to do, and before you really start working on the actual landing pages themselves. So your market, if your market is shoppers who are maybe time poor and you just want them to come to visit your site, clearly you're going to have a different approach than if you want people to, say, read white papers or case studies or ebooks or so on and so forth. But anyway, coming back to one of the things that is used a lot when trying to get people to consume content, of course, is the use of numbers, 42 ways, 31 ways, or so on and so forth. Adjectives. I'll show you some great examples, including one of our own, whereby the use of adjectives, extraordinary, wonderful, amazing, are used. And again, that can get too cheesy, but I think there's a balance between cheesy and something that gets somebody's attention. And you'd be amazed, there's a very large consulting firms out there, using these adjectives to get your attention. Have a rationale. This is the reason, the lists, the secrets, the things like that, the best of, And again, I've got some examples to show you there. Use what, why, how can you buy a better carpet? It's the use of that. What should you be considering when you are completing your tax form or buying a pension or something like that? When should you? So these things are often used in attracting people's attention. And actually, if you go and pick up a typical newspaper, just a national newspaper, something like that, you see them using these things often, these type of approaches in headlines, because of course they've been doing it for literally centuries and they know what they're doing. And a headline, again, going back to Ogilvy's statement, should be eye-catching. It should be something that you want to engage with. I remember once when I was in a foreign city reading a headline, the 10 most dangerous cities in the world, and I thought to myself, am I in one of those dangerous cities? That was a real eye-catch, and of course I read it and then I read another one and so on and so forth. Make a bold promise. I think this is within the headline itself. So, and again, I've got some examples in a moment. And if you think about it, the previous slide, I'll just go to the previous slide a sec. Oh, hang on, I've got to go all the way back to the bullet points. The previous slide does exactly that. It makes a bold promise. It says, go back, 5 easy tricks to help you write catchy headlines. That's the promise, isn't it, of the actual content itself. So I'm just going to have to flip through this next one, again, quicker. So those are the 5 things. I didn't want to not answer the question when I was putting the slides together. I thought to myself, you got to tell them. 24 ways to impress your friends. Now, what I like about this, as well as quite an interesting headline for an item, it's actually, notice the design in here, and this actually came off a design site, because it's actually the 24 ways that you're most interested in. Yes, the impress your friends. So I think it looks good. It's a catchy thing to do. I could see it sitting on, say, a jewelry site or an accessory site or an interest site, a lifestyle type of site. And I just think it's cleverly done. And what's interesting about this, it's not just been plonked on the page, it's been designed. Yeah. This is one of our own. I said I was going to share one of our own with you. Now, this particular ebook always gets us the most remarkable conversion rates. I mean, we've had conversion rates on this of like 80%, 86%, I think we got. And as you can see, it's using the same technique as the previous example, because the thing that we've got, and it ticks some of the boxes, it doesn't use the number thing, but it uses the extraordinarily successful. So the how to plan and build, and then this big, bold, extraordinarily successful content marketing campaign and extraordinary success. We've used this in promoted posts on LinkedIn. You may have actually seen it. So what we do is we use social media marketing. Now, you may or may not know that social media these days is actually quite difficult to get organic reach because of the way that they work now. And say typically Facebook and LinkedIn. Conversely, using promoted posts actually works extremely well in building data and using automated marketing, that sort of thing. And this particular headline seems to work better than all the other ones we've used in terms of ebooks. It just works well. I think partly because there's a lot of interest in content marketing, and partly because of the headline itself. If you want that ebook, by the way, and you still haven't got a copy of it, I've put a little email address in there, and all you have to do is post this workshop, talk to me at whitehatmedia.com, and just put in content marketing ebook. And Jack, who's sitting here next to me, will make sure you get a copy of that book. And Jack's terribly efficient, so he should get that to you like you have it by close of play today. Okay, we've also, by the way, we're putting all our ebooks that we've been publishing over the last year or so into a full resource section that we're going to invite people to sign up to so they can get all the ebooks they want and all the webinars, I think. So that's the second bit, and I'm going to speed up a bit because I don't want to run out of time, and you are spending your very precious lunch hour maybe listening to this and watching it. So the third tip is craft and refine your offer and your content. So this is a little bit about process. This is making sure that you provide the best content at the time that it's needed, and that you do it in such a way as to make the process smooth and seamless. And I do have a couple of examples of this. So providing the right information at the right time. So at this particular point, obviously I have not got the previous slides on this example, sorry, the previous pages of this example, but here we've got buy Scribbles for, it's a drawing app for the Mac, only $19.95, a little bit of information. And that has to be really carefully crafted, that content there, those 2 paragraphs. By this time, the person has already been through the introduction of the product, and now it's a case of, okay, buy now. So this little piece of information at the price, obviously you can download it, and it's just clean and clear, and I think done well, and a good example there. So here, we're slightly earlier in the process, and in this case, we're talking about email tracking and email marketing. And in this case, you want to provide the things, provide the content that the users want to see. So deliverability, the questions, and I would think that what this company have done would have been to do surveys into their customer base. And that, by the way, is really important. Surveying your audience, surveying your users, and finding out what particular things they were interested in, and that would then inform them as how to structure the buying process and how to provide the content that was needed for those users. So working backwards, it's user experience, user conversion basically starts with the customer, with the users, with the audience. Yeah, and that you need to do research and to find out what they want from those web pages. And those businesses that have invested a small amount of money or small amount of time into investigating and researching their customer base always do better, because then they know that what they are delivering via their user experience is going to be better. So pop-ups, now this is an interesting one, because in my research, obviously I went off and had a look at a number of sites to update myself, and I would look at a number of sites, including user conversion specialists and software sites and so on and so forth, and almost all of them had a pop-up. Now pop-ups get a bad name because they often appear when you don't want them. So what I've put here, and I do I think the research actually will back this up. Valuable pop-ups do work. Even if you go to somewhere like Harvard Business Review or Forbes magazine, you will find them using pop-ups. And I think the reason they've got a bad name, I think, pop-ups, is because oftentimes you're not interested in them. It's just an irritation. But this one here from Kissmetrics, I think they've done it well. I think that they will have put this a so-called interstitial, which an interstitial is something that appears between visiting one page and another page, and otherwise in this case called a pop-up. And that's a good thing to get somebody's attention, because I mean, while it popped up while I was looking at a page, it was worthwhile. It was something that I could very easily download and want to download. And I was looking at Conversion Rate Experts site. They have a little pop-up offering great little kits and things, CRO kit. So others do it as well. And I do think that if you can get the pop-up working well for you and it is appropriate and relevant to your target market, they work. If they are irritating and what you're offering doesn't have a great deal of value to the target market, then of course, they shouldn't be used. But I don't think that one should simply write off pop-ups as all being worthless, as often happens. Now, I mentioned about focus. Well, I mentioned about user journeys and understanding your audience. And what we do when we're creating, this is tip 4, as it were, is to understand the user journey from source to conversion. And by source, I mean, how did they get to your website in the first place? And then we're into a whole discussion about analytics and attribution and so on and so forth. But different people will come to your website with different purposes, and they will also come from different segments. And that's something we've covered in previous webinars when we're looking at content and so on and so forth. But the idea is that you should be mapping how people get to your site and what you want them to do. And here, for example, we've got 2 user flows. We've got one user flow whereby someone has used paid search, in this case AdWords, and they land on a product page and they make a purchase. Now, obviously, in this particular example, the user journey is incredibly simple, and the other type of thing that the landing page wants, that type of outcome that the landing page wants to achieve, might be to get people to sign up to an email list. So again, incoming this time from social media, and they again hit a landing page, different maybe from the product page, and then they join an email list. And this is obviously, again, very simplistic. Now, I was going to put up some of the more complex user flow diagrams, which can get really quite complicated going through every step and that sort of thing. I thought it wouldn't really add much value to that. But the concept is worth doing. In other words, it's worth sitting down and saying, okay, what do we want people to do? And then we do exactly that. We've been doing exactly that ourselves with regards to getting, the sign up to the webinar. Now, we've been talking about, okay, if you're already being told about the ebooks, do you want another email to be told about the webinar? All that sort of things coming into our considerations. And it's something I think you would be advised to do, is to work out where your channels are, how, and of course what your potential customers and your customers do once, what you want them to do, and how to refine that process. Sorry, I've gone forward instead of back then. So also measurement. Yeah. Now this typically would be used using like an app like Google Analytics, where you'd be measuring the number of visitors and the number of unique users and so on and so forth. We've also done a webinar, I believe, on analytics. If we haven't, we should do. I'm sure we've included it in other ones. But if you measure the user journey, you can then improve it. Yeah. Now, what happens on web pages, once you set up analytics properly with tracking codes and so on and so forth, you can see things, and what you can do is you can say, okay, what do we need to improve? And I consider these like hurdles. Now, sometimes the hurdles are so large, so high, and so insurmountable on a web page that your conversions, your pipeline, if you like, will drop considerably, simply because maybe the process is too long, maybe it's too baroque, maybe it's too complicated, maybe there's something putting off the people from converting. So you've really got to go into your analytics and look at your funnel and say, okay, where are people falling over? Yeah, where are people just not making it? You basically want to either remove the hurdles altogether. Do you need, 12 steps to get the person to achieve whatever it is you want them to achieve? Or can you boil that down and reduce it to 3 or 4 steps? Do you need the information that you're asking for? Or really, you're really not going to do much with it anyway, so why are you asking for it? And it's those sort of considerations. Has the site been over-engineered through the use of graphics or technology? And basically, you want to minimize the number of steps and make it as simple and easy as possible to achieve those conversions. So again, it's something I would ask you to do, and make sure that we'll talk about testing in a moment, but make sure you're not asking your friends, because as I always say, your friends are going to tell you what you want them, they think you want to hear. You need people who are unbiased, telling the honest truth about how good or otherwise it is using your web pages. And this needs to be tested. As I say, we're going to talk about testing in a minute. But in the first instance, you can use something like Google Analytics or one of the products out there, like Optimizely or something like that, to determine where you're getting these problems, and then either remove them or make them as small as possible. Okay. The page itself is interesting. I was sort of looking around for examples of this. The page itself can indicate some sort of flow here. So in this particular example from Silverback software, it is actually usability testing software. They give you some of the features, or rather some of the benefits. Yeah. And then of course you've got the next step, which is to download, and then finally the purchase. So it's sort of, they've built the flow in the order of really here of the page, and this is just a simple screen grab I've got here in the order of what they want you to do things. And that you can do, and we see that quite a lot when we see steps along the top, when people use steps along the top. Forms. Now, when I was looking at forms and all the technology behind forms, quite frankly, we could do a whole webinar, and I'm tempted to do this just on how to create forms. I don't know whether it would have enough appeal, but forms, there's so much that is done that can be done well with forms, and there's so much that where people make mistakes and actually create hurdles where they shouldn't be hurdles. That we could literally have an entire webinar just on forms. And I'm sort of, as I said, I'm tempted to actually do that. Forms, I found some really nice examples here. So forms can be fun. You see this one here, name, email. It's obviously type of a feedback form or an inquiry form, and they've designed it in the form of like an email, old style email letter. I think it's quite fun in the way it's been implemented there. So they don't have to just be sort of dull and over corporate. You can use fun graphics to complete a form. Language can be informal. The fields do not have to say name, email address. They can say, what's your name? It's a pleasure to meet you. Again, one doesn't want to get overly cheesy here, but I quite like the ways. And what can we help you with? Now again, I think that sort of thing should be tested, but it's certainly more informal. And why stick to the formal, rigid approach, which again is another thing that you'll find when you start looking into user experience and user conversion and conversion rate optimization, is that, and this is the whole thing about this webinar actually, there are no rules as such. There are people who try to apply rules. They say, oh, you can't do that. You've got to put everything above the fold. But there's as many case studies out there that will show you that actually it can be better. If you want to include a lot of information, you can put stuff below the fold. So we're talking about guidelines, as they said in the parts of the Caribbean, are more guidelines. Okay, there are not hard and fast rules, and you can bet that if there is a rule out there, then somebody's breaking it and actually doing very well out of it. So I quite like this sort of type of open-minded, let's try this approach. And in this particular instance that you're looking at now, rather than be formal in terms of inviting people to complete the form, they've chosen to use informal language. But clarity is vital, okay? That's one thing that does seem, I say vital, again, guidelines, but I'm thinking common sense here. If you want somebody to fill a form in, then make sure it's absolutely clear. And here we got custom bags. You can see it's a really easy type of form and very clear and got some really strong design there and so on. Now, I don't know what you think about EasyJet. I know that they've been going through a major makeover over the last couple of years with a new CEO and so forth. And I use EasyJet a lot, and I actually do like EasyJet. I recently, I won't name the other airline, I recently took a holiday, and outgoing I had to book through EasyJet, and when I came back I had to book through another airline company. And the difference in experience of booking was huge because other said company, it really wasn't very nice. It was much more clunky. And I was trying to work out, so I had a look at the EasyJet process, and I personally think they do a lot of things really, really right. One of them, by the way, is if you've already used them, you can book stuff really quickly because they've got all your information, even up to and including actually confirming the flights with your passport details. So they keep those on record. I don't know how they do that because you'd have thought that was something that you wouldn't be allowed to do, but they do keep the pass, and there's a lot of things here. And then I realized I was looking at the process because I revisited it for this particular webinar, and I realized there's a lot of things that they do that are actually very subtle and very clever. And one of them is that they get a lot of information about you, but they don't use forms at all. Or very little. I mean, basically what you do is you key in where you want to go and what date you want to go, with a few other parameters, such as you can see just on the left there. It's a bit vague, but things like obviously choosing dates, which I know is a standard thing. Choosing dates is very easy, but the colors they're using are very sensible. And basically you provide them with a lot of information without actually filling form in. You do have to fill, as I say, some of the things in, but they make that as easy as possible. And this second example here is exactly what I'm talking about. You go through a process, which I was talking about above. You're keeping the user informed about what stage the user's at, flights, flight options, checkout, confirmation. And they take you through this. You choose your seat and you tell them how much baggage you want to take, and you give them all sorts of other information, but it's not form filling, you see. And I think that's quite clever. In fact, when you finally get to the bit where you have to put in who the passengers are, if you're booking a holiday, for example, there is a little data, but it's done again really, really cleverly. And if you've used them before, personally, I find it could be improved. That layout looks a bit cluttered at the page we're looking at. It could be slightly improved. You've got the sort of a bit of buttons here and buttons there. But overall, I am impressed. And I do find that I can book flights using EasyJet. I have no connection with them, by the way, other than my customer. I do find that you can book a flight really quickly and really easily. 5 minutes, that'll do it. And sometimes I am booking them at the last minute. And I think they are good, considering the amount of information that they need. It's a slick booking. And if you compare it with some other airlines, I think it's much better. Now, validation is a really contentious area. Some people say you have to have it, you have to use it, so on and so forth. And other people say you don't. Why not just let people? And I noticed some of the new sort of social media sites, there's no real validation going on there. Basically, you might probably get an email just asking you to confirm that you've registered, and they literally just ask for your email address. In this particular example here, they're asking for a password and then confirm the password, which I personally, I actually quite like, because sometimes your finger will hit the wrong button and then you've forgotten the password and then you have to find out what it is. But here is an example from Dropbox, and I think they do it very well, because look at this. It's a Dropbox account, and they're asking you for your first name and your last name and your email address, and obviously agree to the terms of service and a password. That's it. Yeah. Now, of course, you get the verification email in this particular instance, but they're not asking you anything else. And I think they have taken the approach of minimalism and clarity and so on. And I think that if you can take that route, if you can go down the simpler route, it's a better thing to do. Yeah. Layout is really important, of course. And this, of course, is a practical guide to designing for the web. So I'm assuming they know how to do layout properly. And sure enough, I just look at that and I think, hey, isn't that clear? Clear, concise, uncluttered. And a real expert has put that together. And I just think that there's all sorts of clues on it with the use of the red buttons, the paperback there, £29, the buy now, designing for the web. It just works for me. And as I say, why does it work? It works because everything is in my opinion, purely subjective maybe, but it just works. It's clear, it's concise, it's uncluttered, and it's very well laid out. So one column and then a double column on the right. It's good stuff. Now, Amazon, you may think it is busy, even cluttered, some would say, but the amount of work that goes into an Amazon page is enormous. They have a full-time team working on conversion, working on user experience, and I've seen Amazon over the years get better and better and better. And I just think, again, if you look at some of the things that they do, and we'll look at a couple of examples in a minute, it's just, you've got the horizontal, it's not so much a slider, the buttons there. You've got the obviously the search field where you could use the drop-down menu. You've got the sections on the left. You've often got you've got small ads for things that they're doing on the right. There's a lot of stuff going on there, but I do think they do it well, and I do think it's one of the things that contributes to their success, apart from the 1 hour service that they're now offering, which is incredible, and the good service that they deliver. I think that UX, they recognized a long time ago that conversion was really, really important, and I do think they do it well. And maybe I'm going to get torn apart by some other UX people, but I think they're a good example of a business that has a lot of things to sell, yeah, and has to get people to move around the site a lot, but in an easy way. Generally speaking, moving around Amazon, I don't find a problem at all, and it's actually very intuitive. And again, I think they do it well. And their layout, the way they lay things out, the things are in the right place. This is item 6, build proof, yeah. And again, this is something I would like you to do, is to look at your web pages and say, this is your landing pages. Have we got some sort of proof? Have we got box out testimonials, for example? Now, this isn't just a testimonial. This isn't just part of the text. This is a strong box out. So we've got a reverse font, we've got quote marks, and the whole idea of quote marks is obviously they indicate that someone has actually said this, and they also highlight the thing, and I think it's a good thing to do. So there are obviously many other ways of showing credentials, such as memberships of associations, partnerships, user reviews, all this type of thing. But I think this type of thing, and I know that some of you are B2B, I think this type of box out testimonial is a really useful thing to do. Another example here, and again, this is obviously for booking systems in the tourist sector, in the hospitality sector, as it were. And again, a nice box out, again, using the quote marks, and again, in this case, actually an identifiable individual. This is, I guess, a social accreditation. And as I said, there are multiple accreditations. And again, I think we've covered this in the past when we've been talking about content marketing. This is a social one, whereby you've got user-generated content. It's Dave Chaffee's extremely good book, Digital Marketing Strategy, Implementation and Practice. A few years old now, but nonetheless written by people who know what they're talking about. And of course, 4.5 stars, 37 reviews. Again, use those sort of things. So we're talking about user reviews, we're talking about case studies, we're talking about testimonials, we're talking about happy customers saying nice things about what you do, and that's a really good thing to have on a landing page. Not obtrusive, not in the way. As I said, using techniques like boxes, like quote marks, or like stars. Yeah. So that's a good thing to do. Now, clever visuals. What are clever visuals? These are visuals that you often, road signs use clever visuals, yeah? And in fact, if you start to get into the whole user experience sort of science and art of it, you will find that you look around you, you can't look at a road sign without going, that isn't really telling me what I need to know, or that is telling me what I need to know. And it's the whole concept of using imagery to tell you something or encourage you to do something. Now, the thing I want to draw your attention to on this page is the look inside. I know it's been around a while, but isn't it clever? Because it's basically, you've got the book cover in the first place that you're thinking about buying, and then you've got the look inside. So it's encouraging you. There are actually other things. Again, I'm talking about Amazon again, I know, but shop all departments. And again, Amazon use imagery a lot. Obviously, what they use is the imagery of what they're selling. So you get the whole, if you want this, if you like this, you might like this type of thing. But it's using visuals in a clever way. And another way to use visuals is to keep people informed. So here we've got instructions to reset your password have been emailed to you. Please check your email. Sometimes you can see, when you're going through a process, you can see icons used, but it's using graphics to inform and encourage or encourage people to do things. And there are dozens of examples out there, and it's something, again, you can use on your landing pages to encourage people to convert. Testing. This is really test and improve. This is actually the 8th bullet point. For some reason I mentioned it the 7th, actually the 8th. So it's test and improve. And what I mean by this is that you don't just test, you actually improve as well. This here is A/B testing, and the way A/B testing works, and we do A/B testing a lot with email. So A/B testing typically you're going to change one thing or two things. In this case, example shown, you're showing two different layouts. With the email though, you can use different headers, or headings to the email. But again, if you're going to test, you can literally test one thing. So you have do different pages testing one thing. And there's a website, I think it's called Which One. You now have to pay for access to it, Which Test One. And it's where you can see A/B testing. And you basically do a different 2 pages every day, and you choose which you think won. And generally speaking, the ones that win have the principles that we've already covered. So they are something clearer. They've used the correct calls to action or better calls to action. They've used better terminology. Okay, so they got A/B testing, and then of course you've got multivariate testing, is whether you try more than one version. You often see multivariate testing when in, say, display advertising, which is obviously an outreach type thing, push marketing. So display advertising, you might use 4 or more different versions, hence multivariate testing. And in the same way, you can use multivariate testing for your landing pages. Which one converts the best? Of course, you've got to bear in mind the other things that we talked about, such as the source of the traffic, where is it coming from, the segment you're targeting, the content, the heading, the visuals, the call to action, and so on and so forth. And from this, as you see there, in this particular graphic, you've got the one that got the best conversions, the winner. But you'd want to understand why. Now, often in an office, when you're putting together landing pages and you're putting together websites and so on and so forth, I must warn you, there's a great deal of argument. Yeah, people say, oh no, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't have anything under the fold at all, or we shouldn't use a blue button, or whatever it is, or we shouldn't use sans serif fonts or serif fonts, and we've got to be using Fibonacci numbers for the design, or whatever it is. Actually, the best thing to do is to resolve those disputes through testing. I remember once having a brilliant discussion, indeed disagreement, friendly disagreement I should say, about whether you should send proposals in landscape or portrait. Yeah, and I remember having this discussion. So what we did, which is quite amusing, is we simply set up a poll, a twit poll, and I was right, it's portrait. And the guy I was discussing it with, even voted for himself, but I won, it's portrait. And I think it's portrait because people prefer that, because then they can pile things on their desks easier. But the point I'm making is that test, and it is so important to test. In fact, if you were investing into a campaign whereby you wanted to improve your user conversions, the first thing that most people would tell you is find out what you've got at the moment. So find out where the choke points are, have a look at the analytics, research your segments, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So it's testing and researching would come at the very beginning. I know I've put it at the end. When you start planning user testing, it's always a good idea. And again, I've a very good friend, my friend John, who's a typically top person for one of the major agencies in London. He came down to see me a couple of weeks ago, maybe actually probably about a month ago, and we were talking about the value of putting things on pencil and paper first. It's amazing what you can achieve because, of course, okay, there's loads of software out there where you can do wireframes and so on and so forth, but it's a really good idea to start off with a blank sheet of paper. And I thought there's a wonderful alliteration here. Pen or pencil and paper works for planning. Works perfectly for planning. A wonderful alliteration. But it doesn't, you don't need expensive software to put together wireframes and ideas and layouts and so on and so forth. Once, of course, you've tested those, you can then go on and create the web pages. But it's a good idea to start with pencil and paper. Here is once you move on to proper wireframes, and you can user test wireframes as well. You don't have to test full web pages or fully designed web pages or websites. You can then run these by user panels as well to see whether the right things are in the right place. And here's an example of a wireframe. If you are proposing to redo your pages or rebuild your website, this is always a good idea to go through this process of paper-based design and then getting something like this created. And then obviously you talking about site structures and so on and so forth. The key point, though, is to make sure that you do test. That's the important thing, and find out what is actually working and not working. And if you don't want to do that, then certainly have a look at your funnel in Google Analytics and maybe put a product like Ethnio behind your website to tell you which gives you feedback about your web pages. Okay. So summary: 1, have clear calls to action, CTAs. We've talked about that. Okay. 2, use effective headlines and really work those headlines, really craft those headlines. 3, craft and refine your offer and your content. Don't just write content. Oh, well, that's going to work. We'll stick that on the website. It describes what we do. Think about it. Yeah. Think about how we can create content that's short, succinct. Most times you're talking economy if you want to convert people. Yeah. And typically on, say, a retail page, you might want to have a short description of the product, but if people want the technical specifications, maybe put that under a tab or put that somewhere else or behind a link. Yep. Create focus and conversion coupling. This is all about trying to think about your landing pages as a highly customized shop window, selling a particular thing or having a particular thing on it, and that thing is targeted at a particular type of person, a profiled individual. And it's this focus about user journeys and understanding the user journey that basically people who come through PPC, generally speaking, do behave differently than people who come through social media. Yep. Social media, because it's an engagement media, they're looking maybe for more type of content, possibly doing some research. Oftentimes people who come through PPC, especially when buying products, are often just quick buyers. They just want to come in and buy something fast. Yeah. Which is why you get the 2%, 3% type of conversion rates. And as we know from previous webinars, 97% of people out there are literally coming to your web pages to research. So having some type of focus is a really good thing to do. Ensure excellent layout. That's obvious. If someone comes to your web pages and it's cluttered and busy and nasty and wonky, then they're just not going to want to do business with you, and it removes the trust element as well. Build proof, create trust, show credentials. Again, this is a no-brainer in a way. Sort of makes it's an obvious thing. Use clever visuals, as I said. Use visuals to convey messages, to inform your customers or your users as well. And then finally, test and improve. Which, as I said, ironically, if you were to begin the CRO process to make your web pages better, the first thing you would do is run some tests, and then run more tests when you've made the changes. So the idea is to learn as much about the problems as possible before implementing the solutions. So that's the summary. It's now 10 to 2, so we have 5 or 10 minutes if you have any questions. If not, then no problem at all. The webinar will be available on the site to download if you want the slides and so on and so forth. Please, I've got some contact details here. Oh yes, I've already mentioned the free ebook, the Content Marketing, the Extraordinary Guide to Content Marketing Success, setting up and running successful campaigns. This is one, another free guide, because of course that's what we like. We like to do free content for you, and it's 42 tips on how to generate more business from your website. We did include it in the last webinar, so maybe you missed it or haven't responded yet, but all you have to do in this case is email talktome@whitehatmedia.com and put the in the heading, just put 42 tips ebook. And once again, Jack, who is still sitting next to me, will make sure you get that ebook. So just before I go, I will just, any questions? I'm just going to check the chat thing to see if there's any messages. No, none yet that I can see. No problem though. That's not untypical. Often people are, don't want to put something in a message chat there. But if you do want to ask a question or contact us, of course, we can look at your website. We can optimize it as well as for users. We can look at SEO and your PPC and what you're doing with your pages and so on and so forth. Give you full report on that. More than happy to do the initial work actually free of charge as well, just to give you some heads up on the problems that you might have. But as I say, we'll be publishing the details of the next webinar very soon. Here are my personal details. I'm going to spin that back again. I'm just going to remove that. Here are my personal details. We have actually changed our phone number because I believe they were talking about there was some issue of charging for phoning the other one, so we've gone for an 03455 440223. That's our phone number. My name is Jeremy Spiller. I'm looking at the attendees. I can recognize some of the names there, so it's lovely to see you here in the audience. And by all means, there's my email address. As I say, we're coming up to Christmas soon. Scary. I know we're in August, but it's going to come quick enough. And of course, some of us, things tend to get busier once people come back from holiday. So we do want our websites to be as effective as they can be. We do want our search engine marketing working as well as it can be. So by all means, give us a shout if you want to have a chat about any of that. No obligation on having to use us or anything like that. I'm sounding a bit pitchy today, aren't I? Anyway, hopefully see you at the next webinar. And thank you very much for listening to me on this one. And I hope you enjoyed it and found it very, very useful. Thanks very much and have a very good month. See you very soon. Bye now.